So we're going to move straight on to our first speaker. We've only got 45 minutes today, and I'm going to be brutal with our timings. So I'm going to make sure that we are able to finish at the allotted time. So I'm going to introduce Kate Chappell, who is working with UK100 and was one of our net zero pathfinders on the Local Power and Action project and helped coordinate the Powers in Place report. So I'm going to hand straight over to Kate.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much, Chris. Well, as Chris said, Powers in Place is a reference source for the powers that local authorities, particularly in England, have to deliver net zero and to tackle climate change. It provides all of the legislation along with the barriers to implementation of each bit of that legislation and how that legislation is used in practice along with real examples. It is an absolutely whopping report. It's 187 pages. And it includes 131 case studies of what local and combined authorities are doing on the ground. As I say, it's primarily a reference source for you and your powers. It was written by consultants called Quantum, and they went through a huge process of desk research and discussion with local authorities and other key stakeholders. For those of you who are familiar with Power Shift, which was a UK100 report 2 years ago, Powers in Place is effectively an update of that and really shows how much policy has changed within the last 2 years, but also how much policy we're on the brink of finding out about, how much is about to change still. The report is structured into 5 chapters. There's one on overarching powers, and then sector-specific ones on transport, buildings, energy infrastructure and waste, and a supplementary chapter which we're publishing as a standalone report on nature, and that will be coming out in the next couple of months, so please look out for that. Powers in Place also highlight where UK100 have been active on our members' behalf, or the consultations that we've responded to, or the advocacy work that we've done. And as I say, the whole report is focused around what goes on the ground and exploring the barriers to delivery in practice. But overall, what I'd like you to remember most of all is that this is a handbook and it's for you. So please do familiarize yourself with the document and begin to use it. Please bookmark it following this session and just get involved and check out the different sections. It's for you. Please use it. Okay, next slide, please. Moving on to the findings. As I say, the report goes into a huge amount of details, but then you can take a step back and see what the findings say overall. And they find that local authorities aren't able to deliver on net zero to the level that they'd like to because they're hamstrung by a lack of a defined role in net zero delivery. There is currently no duty, as I'm sure you're aware, no obligation on local authorities to work towards net zero. And to take one tiny example, local area energy plans, there's no defined role for local area energy plans. There's nowhere within the structure, the formal structure within councils that those are lodged or that they sit or that they can be adopted in. So a lack of defined role across the piece, one example. Second thing that hamstrings local authorities is a policy and strategy ecosystem that fails to enable and support local delivery. Again, literally tens and tens of examples through this document. One I could pull out is on transport, for example, where still the tools that are being used to assess cost-benefit ratios for active travel projects are really mitigating against them, and constantly, even when those active travel projects are strongly supported strategically, the cost-benefit tools that are being used give them a low score, which makes it very difficult to finance them. The third finding is that there's conflicting remits of public agencies, and that prevents ambitious authorities from delivering their aims. One example on this is the Planning Inspectorate, who we've seen give very inconsistent rulings to different local authorities around their local plans, especially on standards for new builds. one example being the difference between their rulings on Cornwall and Lancaster. And finally, insufficient funding and resources, and those funding streams that do come are inequitably and competitively distributed and rarely long-term. So the overall conclusion from this huge document is that despite the progress of a handful of trailblazers, local authorities are still waiting for government to put the necessary resources and powers in place for local authorities to deliver on their net zero ambitions. That is the overall finding. Moving on from those findings to the recommendation from the report makes three main recommendations. The first is that the government should introduce a net zero local powers bill that permits and obliges the relevant levels of local authorities to deliver an effective pathway to net zero. Is that coming up, Ruby? Thank you. Thank you. So a net zero local powers bill. The second key recommendation is a local national net zero delivery framework, which we think should be co-designed between local authorities and the UK government and overseen by a national net zero delivery unit. And the third key recommendation from this report is that ministers should end competitive short-term funding and replace it with strategic needs-based long-term funding. Now, hopefully those three things are music to your ears in the sector. The document, as I mentioned, is really rich on detail. It's in high definition. But I'm going to pull out just one key ask from each of the sectors. But I want you to be aware that there are three key asks in each sector, and those are underpinned in each sector by about 20 key policy changes that this report recommends happening. So there's lots of crunchy detail in there for you to explore. But a key ask by sector on transport is to devolve the powers for London-style transport system, making sure that it's integrated, reliable, more affordable and simpler to use into regional transport areas. And that includes incorporation of the oversight of buses into local transport authority role and giving local authorities the powers to require bus and rail operators to collaborate on timetable and cross-ticketing. Second key ask by sector on buildings is to provide support for area-wide retrofit programs, no longer the very tightly defined smaller schemes. We really need funding and support and guidance for area-wide retrofit programs for all local authorities. On energy, as I referenced before, it's a national framework for local area energy plans. And on waste, the key ask is really on clarity and guidance for the new requirements that are going to come in. And that is a very poor summary of all of the detail beneath. And just then finally to talk about how you can use powers in place. As I mentioned, it's great to use it to dip into, to get across new topics. If you don't currently work on waste, for example, the kind of 20-page section on waste is a really good primer, or to brush up on the ones that you do know about, just to get totally abreast of current policy and what's coming up. I'd also recommend, if there's anyone new within your council, giving them powers in place and recommending they dip into it is a fantastic way to get them up to speed with what is happening in the sector. As I mentioned, really in-depth chapters, transport, buildings, energy infrastructure and waste. The report is especially strong on minimum energy efficiency standards and local area energy plans and waste. And please, finally, look out for some of the upcoming resources from UK100 to support you in sharing the findings and in taking some advocacy action. So we'll be doing some topic-specific briefings. We'll be doing a summary of actions that councils can take, political briefings, and this slide deck will be shared afterwards too. But none of it is any substitute for the detail you get from the actual report. Please do dip in and have a look, and then please read it and share it and shout about it. I think raising our voices together on this will have an impact, and this report really provides us with the evidence base to underpin that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate, for that excellent summary of the report. It's a really important time that we've launched this in a whole new load of cabinet members and leaders who have come into positions. This is a really useful primer for them to get across things, and even people who are very well experienced. There'll be things in the report that you wouldn't necessarily be across or know, especially some of the statutory instruments and powers that are already there for you to use. So now, how are we going to take this research and these recommendations forward? We've asked Kate Vaughan, who is the Campaigns and Communications Director at UK100, to talk about the advocacy that we're doing on behalf of you, our membership. So over to Kate.
Thanks very much, Chris. Can I have the next slide, please, Ruby? So as Kate outlined, Powers in Place is a comprehensive handbook that includes the overarching and specific local powers that local authorities currently have, alongside the challenges and the barriers they face in delivering net zero at a local level. So with that in mind, since the Powers in Place report was published, it's been shared with a broad range of stakeholders, including UK100's membership, UK100's Business Supporters Network, policymakers, a range of parliamentarians, including MPs and peers who are interested in this sector, ministers, shadow ministers, committee and APPG members, for example, other net zero advocacy NGOs and organisations in this space, alongside key partners that UK100 works with, and a mix of mainstream media and trade press. So from our perspective, using Powers in Place, the Powers in Place report is now forming the basis of UK100 stakeholder engagement work, looking at what is actually needed, i.e. the powers and the resources to actually deliver the local net zero ambitions that you all have. And the sheer breadth of the document gives us a comprehensive guide to not only the key areas where local authorities have got the powers that have been outlined just now by Kate, for example, in terms of transport and buildings and local area energy planning and waste and recycling, but where the barriers and conflicts exist as well. And it gives us some practical examples of what works, what doesn't work, the recommendations for how these particular challenges can be addressed. And from our perspective, we're looking at whether that's through providing more money or providing that money in a different way, implementing changes to particular policies, or in some cases, potentially introducing or updating existing legislation at the UK government level. And as Kate outlined, there are 3 overarching recommendations alongside those sector-specific recommendations. And our engagement work with stakeholders is primarily focused on looking at those recommendations and clear asks that we can make, and the tangible changes that can make a difference to helping you to deliver local net zero in your communities. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for UK100's advocacy? Beyond our regular stakeholder engagement work, Powers in Place is key to the advocacy work that we're doing. And there are a range of things going on, but as we're limited for time, I thought I'd include a few of the key pieces of advocacy work that we're undertaking at the moment. Now, members will be aware that we work closely with MPs right across the House, alongside peers as well. We've been working with Vera Hobhouse, the Member of Parliament for Bath, to help her secure a backbench business debate, and that will be a general debate on the role of local government in delivering net zero. The debate will be held next Monday on the 5th of June, and that coincides nicely with World Environment Day. At the moment, we've got 18 members of Parliament, mainly Labour and Conservative MPs, who are signed up to speak in support of Vera's debate. And there won't be a vote taken, but crucially, the Minister and the Shadow Minister will respond to the points that have been raised in the debate. We're also supporting UK100 members to identify and implement solutions locally, drawing on case studies that are included in Powers in Place alongside those specific recommendations. The Powers in Place guide is also being used for our external engagement work, for example, with the Mission Zero network that's being led by Chris Skidmore MP. UK100 is currently participating in that network, and there's a report due in mid-September, just ahead of the party conferences. We also use the report to help us prepare for other external events. So, for example, topic-specific roundtables, looking at issues such as retrofit, and the events that we're organising and going to be participating in the Labour, Conservative and Liberal Democrat conferences later on this year. It's key to helping us in terms of influencing policy right across the 4 sectors that are included in Powers in Place, where the most impact can be made. So we're looking at the key asks and recommendations, and where a change to any of the aspects would be able to make a significant difference. For example, how we can provide longer term funding to deliver projects instead of having those short term ring fence funding pots, which are the bane of everybody's existence. And finally, we're exploring the idea of what we're calling a local net zero powers bill, and what this might contain in order to address and formally implement those key recommendations from Powers in Place and finally tackle those gaps that exist. One way we could do this would be through a piece of legislation that would embed the necessary changes and help local authorities to deliver net zero and local benefits that would bring to your communities and businesses. But I should stress that this is an idea that's currently in its infancy. We haven't worked it up, but perhaps this might come up in the Q&A session in a moment. Some of the key things that might be useful for us to consider if we were to take that idea forward. But I'll hand back now